eternal flame, companion through the darkness and the cold, kindling to others, conversation and love for all. Good morning. Welcome to Cross Street Chapel's Sunday service. I'm grateful for your presence here, for those who joined us in person in what has turned out to be a very late summer for us here in Manchester, and for those who are perhaps in more temperate climes or in their homes online. So wherever you are, I'm grateful for your presence here, and I hope that whatever you're seeking at this time and place, be it a space for joy and celebration, for laughter, for a chance to shed some tears of sorrow and seek commiseration, a chance to perhaps hear a few words of wisdom. Maybe you've come looking to connect with one another or the divine. Whatever you've come here seeking, I hope it will be found as well as a warm community. The latter, of course, I know is here, since I see so many bright and beautiful and coincidentally blue people today. It's quite shocking the number of people here who have somehow been synchronized into that shade. Thank you. So we have our chalice lighting were just a few improvised words. We turn now to our call to worship with these words of Bruce Marshall. Our lives are made up of small moments, sharing a meal with friends or family, wondering about a question that puzzles us, giving help to another, listening to a person and being listened to, talking with another about something that makes us sad, an embrace, a smile, a touch, offering a thought that might help just a little to make more sense of it all. Our gathering here is just such a small moment. It is a small thing we do in gathering, yet it is significant. May we affirm and celebrate the moments that we share here today. Amen. A small gathering, small moment that is significant. And we come to our first hymn, which is printed in your order of worship, Mary Robinson's The Idea.
Thank you.
sometimes like to explore material that's outside of our canon, as it were, of the red, the green, and the purple hymn books. Let us gather now into a time of prayer, which will be followed by our covenant, which is printed in your order of worship and will appear online for those following from home. But first, these words. We gather in hope, that unyielding enthusiasm, and trust that a better world can be made. A world more just, a world more caring, a world free from oppression and hate, a world free to find the best in one another. In our worship, we recognize this search, this strength, and the companionship that is needed to build this world. A world where creation's stone is graced by divinity's fingerprint. Amen. And please read with me our covenant. We gather here in sacred fellowship to witness the fullness of our lives and all life, to hold and be held, tell stories and listen, to be renewed and renew the world. We speak with care and patience. We act with gentleness and compassion. We forgive each other and ourselves. In faith that we build beloved community, we renew our covenant today. Amen. Our story today is about two gardeners. Actually, that's a slight lie. It's actually about three gardeners. We have three sort of small fields, and these women who are gardening. There's one woman over here who loves flowers, and so that's everything that she plants. She just, it's just sown completely. The field is completely covered in this sort of beautiful aromatic color and splendor. And then there's another woman here who likes to grow food. So she has all of these wonderful fruits and vegetables, tubers and onions and so forth, that's able to sort of sustain her through her time. And this woman who loves the flowers, and that's all she grows, she really doesn't understand why one would grow vegetables or fruit, because you can buy them, can't you? You can go to the supermarket and they're there, and you don't need to sort of mess up all of your garden space by having all of these vegetables. Woman over here doesn't understand why one would grow flowers. I mean, you look out in any field and you have all of these sort of beautiful wildflowers they're growing. Why do you need to, you have this valuable space that you can sort of sustain yourself with and have sort of edible foods. Well, luckily there was a woman in between them, and she served as a sort of intermediary. She was friends with both of them. They kept their distance from one another, but she acted in a sort of kind and compassionate way, and sort of was able to be the peace amongst all three of them. But unfortunately, of course, she passed away. And lovingly, as she loved them very much, she had written them into her will. She had specifically given them her garden. She didn't actually specify much about it, just saying that it belonged to both of them, not how it should be split up, 50-50, or some co-management element, but thought that they should be left to make the decision themselves. So you can imagine that there might have been some very contentious arguments when they met in that field to discuss what should be grown there. We should grow flowers, the first said. We should grow food, said the second. And this continued on, and the field was left fallow for quite a while. But then one night, the woman who grew food snuck into the garden, snuck into that middle garden in the middle of the night, because she realized, of course, the other woman would be sleeping, and she set out to plant the field with vegetables and fruits, and particularly sort of tubers that grow underground, so it would be just a bit secretive. So she spent the whole night tilling and planting and caring for the garden. That was very exhausting, so she took a nap as soon as the sun rose up. which was pretty convenient because the first woman then went out into the garden and thought, well, it's going to waste. It should be filled with all of these beautiful wildflowers. So she just threw the sort of scattered of seeds across the whole of the field. They left the garden to its own devices, as there was enough rain at that time so that they didn't have to sort of tend to it too much, and they cared for their own patch. And as you might expect, that little garden did eventually begin to reveal itself to them. Leaves and buds appeared, flowers started to shoot out, as well as evidence of potatoes. And when one realized what the other had done, they again met in the field to sort of, shall we say, duke it out. "I knew I couldn't trust you," one said to the other. "You snuck in and planted vegetables." "Well, you're one to talk," replied the other. "You secretly planted flowers." And as they shouted at each other over the coming days, the garden continued to grow. The flowers bloomed and the food ripened. The woman who grew vegetables noticed that the vegetables were doing better in that middle field than in her own garden. She got a bit curious about that, so she did some research and discovered that the flowers that were growing in the garden acted as natural deterrents for the insects that had been assaulting her own patch. Meanwhile, the woman who was growing only flowers began to see how much fuller and richer that middle patch looked, with its addition of green leafy vegetables that were complementing all of the other colors of the rainbow from those gorgeous wildflowers that she had sown into the wind. So eventually they set their pride aside and they met back in the middle garden, one asking for tips about growing vegetables, the other asking for suggestions on flowers to put alongside the radishes. And in due course, they became the best of friends. So you now have a chance to share your lives, your stories, your flowers and vegetables, if you will. You can light a candle and say a few words here at the microphone, so those listening online, those using the loop system may be able to hear you. If you are online, please type into the chat box and we will make sure that your message is read out. If you are, of course, invited to light a candle in silence. And as always, if you wish to remain seated, know that your presence here is enough. I'd like to light a candle. Thomas had school this past week, started for him. He had a stellar week, and we're very proud of him for that. He's had a difficult night last night, I think because he was probably stuck with Mommy and Daddy yesterday. And then this upcoming week, we are experimenting with having him take the school transport in the morning. We normally drop him off. So this is a big step for Mommy and Daddy, probably less so for him. I'm sure he's going to be fine with it. But just keep him and us in your thoughts if you're able. Thank you.
Well, that candle is for our son's family, who have all been laid low by this horrible coughing virus, which seems difficult to shake off.
Thank you for sharing your story about Plato. So my grandson decided he didn't need to go to school and howled the place down. But when he got there, he really enjoyed it. So it was a fruitless exercise. My candle is lit for my two friends, Angie and Stuart. Angie, unfortunately, is living on borrowed time now. but it's so that they enjoy the time they have left, and it's especially for them. Thank you.
I light this candle for Ken and Penny Johnson. Some of you will know Ken, who's now in his 90s, as the former treasurer of the trustees here. And he did so much more than just be treasurer. He was a really helpful presence around the place. But his wife Penny, who's a much loved and very long-serving minister, is now in the final days of her life in the East Cheshire Hospice. And I know Ken has lots of support, but he's finding it very sad, as it is. So this is our thoughts and prayers for both of them.
This is a candle for my mum and dad. My dad's not been well recently and he's had to stay in hospital, but he's now back home and appears to be recovering well. So it's just for both of them. My mum's been doing a lot of caring at the moment, so and I've been seeing them more regularly, which has been really nice.
For all those joys and sorrows here spoken, and those that remain silently in our hearts. We come now to our next hymn in the Green Book this time, number 220, Break Not the Circle of Enabling Love. We've sung it, according to my records, about 3 years ago. So I figured the tune might not be as well known, but rather than just having Aaron play through it and us sort of scramble to learn it over 3, although actually, and I'm sorry this is a bit of a late announcement, I should have mentioned it before, but there's a 4th verse, which I presume you've gathered. So over 4 verses. I'm going to try and teach it to you, or remind you of it for those who might be familiar. Could I have an F then? So it begins, break not the circle of enabling love. You want to try that? Break not the circle of enabling love. And then the second line is is similar. Where people grow forgiven and forgiving. So it just gets a bit high at the end. Where people grow forgiven and forgiving. And then we follow on from that. Break not the circle, make it wider still. Break not the circle, make it wider still. Till, sorry, the music till it includes, embraces all the living. Could you maybe play that line? Embraces all the living. Thank you. Can you play just the melody through once, and then we'll sing it? You think you got it? You have 4 verses to 4 verses to learn. Right, thank you, Aaron. Just an introduction and then we'll sing. Break not the circle of enabling love, where people grow forgiven and forgiving. Break not the circle, make it wider still, till it includes His graces all the living. From wonder and His love and hearts unite, where words of freedom are within the spoken, and people keep no score of broken tunes. What will that human bonds see they are broken? For in the ruins of the love that frees, till people of whatever race or nation will truly free themselves and of their feet. See eye to eye with laughter and elation. See why it takes so long in and far to teach the world the ground of hopeful praying for peace and progress that will fill the earth, for faith that serves us to creative Thank you. Well done. Our next reading is on silence by the Reverend John Killinger. We must learn to use silence, not as emptiness, but as communication. We are embarrassed by it. We fidget and twist and squirm in our too tight mental underwear. because we have never learned its properties and possibilities. We have always lived with the fear of gaps. We carry an odd bucket of assorted hems and haws, ah wells, and yeses to stuff up any drafty areas that we find in conversations or speeches. But we need to be reminded that silences are the cracks in the dome of eternity, whence wisdom can seep through. We need in the church to come to a place where we can be silent. And so let us return to a time of prayer. Eternal Parent, whose comfort resides within our hearts, giving us the real image of the world, we hold in the present the gifts, the difficulties and blessings of life, in patient hope that they may bear fruit for us, that we may understand their complexity and simplicity. We hold in the present the expectations of the future, the anticipation at what can be, the dread of what can be, both fear and excitement, with knowledge that we will be building the future. Let us hold and still this into calmness and joy. We bring to the present a space for the anxiousness and regret to melt away, for nervous jubilation to become small action, for harried silence to become peaceful quiet. And so we enter into that period of silence for reflection, meditation, contemplation, and personal prayer, knowing that, as John Killinger said, this silence may be the crack in the dome of eternity whence wisdom can seep through. I hope you don't mind my saying that Aaron has been very proactive in actually seeking out contemporary music and sort of colleagues who may have written music that would be appropriate, particularly for the interludes and the elements within our worship. And so we have a very exciting and ambitious sort of collection of music that we'll be hearing. So thank you. Now we get to hear from you, though, as we sing our next hymn in the Green Book, number 171, What Love Can Do, hymn number 171. There is a question that gives me a little pause when I'm in a new environment or when I'm perhaps meeting someone for a first time. Perhaps, for instance, if I'm schmoozing at some event in the evening. And what do you do? Which is a fairly innocuous question, I suppose. And yet it can catch me off guard and put a pebble in my throat. Will they understand, I wonder? A colleague who worked both here and in the U.S., when I asked her about the difference between ministry here versus in the States, remarked that in the U.S. they just sort of know what a minister does. Here, I know you all know absolutely what I do, but beyond our walls, the notion of what ministry entails is a bit more mysterious. So it can likely be an answer that is then followed by another question and another question and another question. Or it's an answer that stops the conversation. There are too many assumptions, too few. Maybe they belong to a wildly different tradition. So they have a conception of what ministry is, but is quite different to our ministry. Perhaps my hesitancy is a sign that I'm not very good at outreach, at flying the flag high for our faith, and ensuring our lamp is not hidden under our bushel. Because the questioning, if it continues, invariably turns from the responsibilities and duties of the minister to the nature of our faith. How do we describe that? Unitarian, what's that? It's complicated is usually my opening gambit, hoping that it will buy me a little more time to figure out how best to present our religion. Which is, again, perhaps a bit odd, as I should not have to have too much time or face too much difficulty describing Unitarianism. I've had plenty of practice. It's my job, to an extent. I have long descriptions, short sound bites, accurate histories, and sweeping generalizations to draw from. And yet, that question, along with, and what do you do? The question, Unitarianism, what's that? Can fill me with dread. Above all, our faith deals with the presence of some force for good within ourselves and within each other, and possibly within our relations. From this belief, we may then extend compassion to the world, creating a heaven on earth, if you will. We are ever present for those corners where love is absent, suppressed, or supplanted by hatred and violence. And so we commit to tackling these inequalities with hope that we can make the world a better place. The ultimate question of death may not be answered by denominational fiat or declaration from on high, but we hopefully know enough to recognize that the beauty in the earth is good, with a capital G. We see that in our story today. Two gardeners, nearly at each other's throats with animosity, manage to see the good in each other's approach. And from this blossoms new plants, new vegetables, new friendship. They both take a step towards the other without a sense of giving up on their own passions. Some of the best conversations outside of our congregation that I have had have been with people who are very certain in their beliefs. They are curious and engaged, and talk becomes lively as we share the nuances of our respective faith. There's no rush to create a new Unitarian or a new Buddhist or Hindu or a new Seventh-day Adventist. When people, including myself, set aside any notion of conversion and simply listen to the other person, respectfully disagreeing at times, but at least willing to encounter their thoughts from the world. When people do this, it can be good as well, with a capital G. And I recently saw that expression, conversation, not conversion, and it felt appropriate for our faith. At our best, we are stewards for the earth, supporters of one another however we are needed, to help each person's worth and dignity be known and amplified. This relies on us living our faith, rather than attempting to get others to live it, though I hope we can, in being good carers for all creation, be seen as a good voice for Unitarianism. I mentioned earlier that I do not often feel like I manage outreach well, but I think in some ways it is because my primary concern is living our faith, seeing that other people are living full lives as well, irrespective of whether their needs include our denominational name. But perhaps that is the outreach that is needed. Having faith that our values are worthy of being lived and that we can share them through our lives, not simply through words or activities or mailers or any of the other paraphernalia that slips through the letterbox and eventually finds its way into the recycling. Being who we are, being aware of ourselves, being aware of the needs of others must be the core of our faith. And tending to this seed, nourished in our soul, will come to be the great tree sustaining generations beyond us. Amen. A few notices before we conclude our service with our final hymn. If you're in need of pastoral care, please speak with me, or you can write to minister@crossstreetchapel.org.uk. We're grateful as well for people to volunteer to assist with greeting, setting up, helping with the IT or the tea and coffee. Do we have anyone to help with the tea and coffee today? Thank you, Alvin. Tea and coffee will be in the Percival Suite after the service, We're grateful as well for any donations that can assist the mission of our chapel. You're able to donate online at justgiving.com/Cross Street Chapel Manchester. You can email me about setting up a standing order. And if you're here in person, we have a retiring collection along with envelopes if you're a UK taxpayer. And if you are a regular in-person giver to the chapel, we have an envelope scheme, so you don't have to write your details down every week. Do let me know if you're interested in joining that. There's a few other upcoming events that are listed in the back of your order of worship. Next week, during the tea and coffee, we'll be bringing through the items from our children's cupboard. We've had sort of a number, over the past year, we've had sort of a few families come to the chapel, and it's just making us aware that perhaps we should review what's in our cupboards. There's a lot of empty or dry paint pots, for example. So we're going to bring everything out and have a good clear out, good sort, and make sure that it's fit for purpose for other families. It could be a play session, yes. Yeah. The week after that, the 24th, instead of Faith in Life, we will be having a climate emergency meeting, a chance to sort of discuss how the chapel responds to the climate crisis. Please do join us for that. It's at 12:30. On the 27th, at the International Anthony Burgess Foundation, the Manchester Lit and Phil will be holding a talk and sort of roundtable discussion, Manchester, the slave trade, and the Manchester Lit and Phil, which follows a report that they had commissioned on their origins and the connection from their founding members to the slave trade, which is quite relevant as many of their founding members were members of Cross Street Chapel as well. So please do consider attending that. It is £15 though, so be aware that there is a cost. Then on the 30th, we have our Friday the 30th at 1 p.m., we have the Latent Trumpet Quartet, will be our Friday lunchtime recital. Our recitals are always free, but they're always fantastic, so please do come along, and we're grateful for any donations which go to the artists to recognize their time, talent, and energy. Then finally, in October, we have our harvest service on the 1st, which is followed by a bring and share lunch. We have a peace service on the 15th, and then on the 22nd, we will be having an animal rights film being shown afterwards, thanks to Sonia. Are there any announcements from the congregation? Let us then sing our final hymn in the Green Book, number 33, Do You Hear, O My Friends, hymn number 33. For the IT, Alvin for the tea and coffee, Sonia for helping to set up, Robin for greeting, and both of you for the flowers that you have brought today. And thank you to all of you for creating and sharing worship today. We close with the words of Sarah York. We receive fragments of holiness, glimpses of eternity, brief moments of insight. Let us gather them up for the precious gifts that they are, and renewed by their grace, move boldly into the unknown. Amen.
You'd have met